Hello, this is Yaakov Cronenberg from Jerusalem. Tonight I'm going to start a new series of classes. These classes are going to be on astrology and its astrology and how Jewish religion views astrology. Let's say that's going to be the topic of our series of lectures. And, like in Judaism is based on a whole series of laws. There's positive commandments, there's negative commandments that the Jew has to fulfill in his everyday life. And one of the questions is can you follow astrology? Can you believe in astrology? Does astrology work? And if astrology works, are you allowed to go to an astrologer? All sorts of questions people ask about astrology. So we're going to cover that over the next couple of classes. How are we going to cover it? We're going to be learning the book, a book of an ancient rabbi that was written about, I would guess, over 1,000 years ago. He lived in the late, a little bit before the year 1100. His major works were published around 1100, and so I guess he was born probably, let's say 30 or 40 years before there, so say 1060, 1070, something around there he was born, so he was over 1,000 years ago. His name is Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra, and he actually wrote many books on all sorts of subjects. He was a very important rabbi of his period. He lived in Spain. He was a little bit before the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra quotes him in his commentary on the Torah a number of times. And he was a very well-known rabbi of his period, an important rabbi, and he wrote many books. He wrote books on many different areas of Jewish law, and he wrote books on astronomy. He was a very important astronomer. He wrote important astronomy books. He wrote books on mathematics, and he wrote book on ethics, and he was a very prolific author, very deep scholar, and he wrote what's called in Jewish law, we said there's not much you find in Jewish literature today, but if you go I think we've been trying to say all along, it's been held back from the Jews, their own tradition. Even Jews themselves never heard of most of the Jewish literature over the last 1,000 years, and I'm sure there's the number of Jewish people that heard of Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra, probably very few. But he was a very learned man, very important in his day, and his books are actually quoted in a lot of the some of his writings are quoted in Latin books. I think one of his books was translated, one or two of his books were translated into Latin even. He was an important rabbi. But today we don't know too much about him. But in any case, he wrote what's called in Jewish law, Sherot and Chuvot, question and answer. Rabbis used to write books. Rabbis they always had to solve legal problems. People would come to rabbis with questions. And so a rabbi, when he would answer the question, if it was an interesting question, a lot of times he would, write down the answer, the question that the client gave, that is congregationalist, or if he was a famous rabbi, it's possibly got letters from all over the world asking him questions. And I guess the ones that were the most interesting and relevant to a vast amount of people, he would write those questions down and write the answers that he gave, and the logical reason for the answers, the logical reasons based on Jewish law, why he ruled the way that he ruled. And those books were called books of questions and answers. And it's a vast literature, all the great rabbis who delved into Jewish law, they all had left behind a lot of these questions and answers, and it's, if you read them, you can get a tremendous amount of history. If you ever really want to learn, the history of the world for the last 1,500 years, you look at each generation, you read those rabbis, and you see what kind of questions they dealt with, Every generation has their own problems, their own things, there's never a generation that's the same as the one that came before it. Like today, how many questions are today about, if you open up just contemporary stuff, these questions were never asked before. What about cloning? What if you're in a spaceship to the moon? How do you keep Shabbat? All sorts of questions, medical questions about, all different types of reproductive questions which never were dealt with before, all types of, just endless stuff, just endless amounts of questions there that were never asked before. And if you go through each generation, you see, each generation, what kind of questions bothered those people, and what kind of problems they had. And, you can learn a tremendous amount of history of the world just by reading all these questions and answers that, that the rabbis were asked, and you really, each generation is completely different. And again, that's going to be one of our ideas in astrology, is that, no 2 days, no 2 moments, no piece of time is the same as any other piece of time. Time is always changing, and with it, everything in the world is changing and moving, and nothing is constant. One of the principles of the great Kabbalist of the last 100 years, Rabbi Shlomo Eliashev, he said in his book that that nothing stands still. Everything is in movement, right? And if you want to stand still, you're in trouble. The world is always moving. It's always going up, and it's coming down, and things just don't stand still. And so we're going to start to learn. So what I want to talk about tonight is this question. There was one question and answer that was asked to Rabbi Abraham Bar Chiya. I'll tell it to you outside, so when we start to learn the book, it'll be easier we'll give you an overview of what the whole question and answer. This book is not really a book, it's just a question and answer. I've translated it. It translates to about 35 pages, if I remember. And so it's not that big, and we can probably cover it fairly short period of time. But it's tremendously interesting, and it's more than just, dealing with Jewish law's approach to astrology. We're going to learn a lot of the basic principles of how the Jews approached the whole subject of astrology, where they saw problems with astrology, how they viewed it, is there differences, are there different kinds of astrology, all sorts of things. And so just don't think it's just talking about, Jewish law and astrology, which it's also talking about. But it's going to cover many, many interesting subject matters. And there's one other thing I want to say is that I have my views on astrology and Jewish law, but I'm not a rabbi. I don't claim to be a rabbi. I mean, I've studied on and off in yeshivas for close to, for over 30 years, but I don't consider myself a rabbi, and I certainly don't consider myself an authority in the legal areas of rabbinics. I spend most of my time. Today everybody is today we're in a generation of specialists. There's no there's very few people who are, who learn everything. Today everybody has their specialty, their field, and Judaism is vast. And so my field is more, mysticism, Kabbalah. And so I don't claim Bakal to be involved in, I don't want to tell you what, I can tell you what I think, but I'm certainly not giving you, rabbinic approval or anything like that. You should ask your own rabbi. But anyway, we're going to learn this letter of Rabbi Abraham here, because I think it's very very revelatory, and it's going to add a lot to our understanding of Judaism, a lot to our understanding of astrology, and it's going to, we're going to I think we're going to get a lot out of this this letter. And I think how I'll do it is I'll start to read it, and then I'll go back over each piece and then try to explain it. Let's say maybe line by line. I'll read a paragraph, and I'll go back and I'll read the paragraph a second time, and we'll try to talk about it a little. And, you can follow it also. I have the text up, so anybody who wants can look at the text. And I hope also I'm going to be putting up some PDFs also that'll help when we get into the letter more. That will also make it more clear to understand the letter. Okay, so let's start. So this is going to be so what was I going to say? Let's just say outside a little bit what this letter is about. Rabbi Abraham here, he was a rabbi in Spain, again about 1100 in that area, and he was a rabbi of his town. And in his town, he had a Talmud. He had a student who he was very close with. And the student decided was going to get married on a Friday morning, right? And the rabbi, they picked an hour, a good hour astrologically to get married. Okay, but what happened is on that day, the night before, that day in the morning, one of the congregationalists died. And so in Jewish law, if you have a wedding and you have a burial at the same time, the burial takes precedence, and the marriage must be delayed till a later time. Okay, so let's say, I forget what hour, let's say the wedding was at 8 o'clock in the morning, let's say 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, and so they had to bury somebody, so they couldn't do the wedding till 11. Okay, so what happened is that the student went and asked his rabbi, is 11 o'clock good to get married? So the rabbi said, it's not such a good time, 11 o'clock. Let's put it off. If already we're going to put it off, let's put it off, I think, till about 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock, everything looks much better. Okay, we'll see why in a few minutes when we get into the letter. But he said everything looks much better at that later time. But what happened is that the congregation heard that the wedding was delayed till 1 o'clock, and they asked why it was delayed so long, and they found out it was because of astrology. And so a lot of the congregationists, they think they know more than the rabbi, and they all say, wow, that's, forbidden what you're doing. How can you... You're practicing like a Chaldean, you're doing you're listening to astrology, which, you should believe there's no place for that in Judaism, etc. And so eventually, I guess they got the rabbi to do it to back off and then do the wedding at the time. In any case, so the rabbi wrote a letter defending himself. He wrote a letter, and this is, I guess he himself asked the question, and he himself answered it. In other words, because it was a letter, it was something that he wrote to defend himself. And he wrote the letter to a friend of his, and so we're going to learn this letter. And let's start now. I'm going to start the quote from the letter. This is the letter of the brilliant scholar, the Prince Rabbi Chiya the Sephardi, may his memory be blessed. This looks like somebody else wrote the introduction. This is not the rabbi himself talking. Somebody else wrote the first couple lines to tell you a little about what the letter is about. This is the letter of the brilliant scholar, the Prince Rabbi Chiya the Sephardi, may his memory be blessed. He was also called Isahab el Shorta, concerning events that happened to him. The letter was sent to Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Barzillai el Batsaloni, may his memory be blessed. Rabbi Barzillai also was a very great rabbi of his period. I think it's the Rabbi Barzillai that wrote a commentary on Sefer Yetzirah, one of the most ancient works in Judaism, the most ancient work in Judaism, it was attributed to Avraham Avinu, the father of Judaism, so we make it the oldest book in the Jewish library, about 4,000 years old. So anyway, he wrote a letter to Rabbi Yehuda Barzillai. It is written, he's going to quote now from the book of Psalms, 34, verse 15. It is written, turn away from evil and do good, in your business dealings and in the works of your hand. Then he goes on, seek peace and run after it. What does that mean? In your interpersonal relationships. So you know what, let me just read it without trying to make a commentary. It is written, turn away from evil and do good in your business dealings and in the works of your hand. Seek peace and run after it in your interpersonal relationships. Another explanation, turn away from evil and do good. If your desire is to turn to that which wisdom and understanding consider undesirable, turn away from the evil desire and accept the advice of good wisdom. Seek peace and run after it. If you see your friend receive improper advice, seek peace and run after it, and warn him as if you were seeking and running after the peace of your own soul. The explanation of the matter, if you are preparing to go on a journey, and a wise man, one of your friends, says, don't start the journey at that hour because it is dangerous, whether because it is an even hour, or the hour of Saturn, or the hour of Mars, or he will say to you, don't start out on this day because the planets are unfavorable for a journey. Be concerned with what he says and don't start out on the journey. Similarly, if there will be before you food that you desire to eat, and the doctor will say to you, don't eat, because it is bad for people of your age group, heed his words and don't eat. This is the meaning of turn away from evil and do good. Stop the evil and take the good advice. Seek peace and run after it. If you see your friend starting a journey or beginning a task on an even hour which is dangerous, or on a day on which the planetary forces are unfavorable for that task, warn him against starting out on the journey or from beginning the task, and you will have fulfilled. Seek the peace of your friend and run after his good. So in the Jew war, from beginning to